Hey, we're going to get going here in about 30 seconds. We're talking about agronomy. We're talking about agronomy, whether you're a farmland owner or a farmland investor that's completely removed from it, or you're a farmland operator. The point is, it's soil. You know what's the most valuable asset many farm people have? Howard's going to give the market update. He'll give you a much more specific number than me. But when you're talking $10,000 to $15,000 for an acre of soil, you got to ask yourself the question: are we treating our soil like dirt? Well, Abby Holliker with Nickel Plate Consulting, she's an agronomist, is going to be on here, and she's going to address all of these things. There's a lot of stuff that gets overlooked. Howard can speak to that for sure, as can probably every representative with Halderman, because that's why they get hired a lot of times, because farms get depleted, they get mistreated, and it's all about the soil. So you know what? When it's the most valuable asset many people have in their portfolio, we got to ask yourself the question: are you maximizing your farm's soil? That's the topic we're going to cover with Abby. As always, we are going to kick off with Howard's market assessment and update. Has some very fresh information because he just had a group of their investors and business partners in Wabash the other day, and he's got very fresh, crisp information. Remember, when you are watching this, you can watch the recording anytime you want. We are recording it on September 25th, 2025. So as of today, you're going to get the market outlook and update from Mr. Halderman. Please take it away.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, at least afternoon here in the Eastern time zone. Welcome today, and yes, this should be very timely information. Tuesday, we had all of our staff at Pokagon up in Northeast Indiana for our fall, what we call our fall Fieldman Area Representative Day. And then yesterday, we had Owner Field Day. So if you are a client of Halderman, you had the opportunity to come and participate in a series of meetings, one of which you're going to see some slides for here in just a second. So this information, I do update these slides to the minute. And so as I get new information in, I try to share that and include them in our slide deck. So if you bear with me, I will share the slides. I'm going to start at a pretty high level.
I misspoke, by the way. They weren't in Wabash, they're in Pokagon.
Well, you know, it's Indiana, Damian. So
anyway, they were in Indiana. By the way, the number of people that came in there, this is the people that you work for on a contractual arrangement managing their farmland investment, right?
Correct.
And so
yes,
they've been hearing the whispers that there's some struggles out here in the farm economy, and I bet you they were more dialed in. Are your people more dialed in when they think they're rich and things are going really well, or are they more dialed in when they think, oh gosh, oh boy, we're gonna lose money? Which were they more dialed in 2023 when things were uppity up, or are they more dialed in 2025 when things are on the way down?
You know, I think, Damian, they're more dialed in when things are changing and when there are unknowns. I think if it's the trajectory that you see on this chart back in 21 and 22, where it's kind of straight up, okay, I know it's a good market and I'm just along for the ride. But if it's a time frame where, you go back to 2016, 2017, 2018, where it's kind of blah, and it's been blah for a while, and we were, land values didn't change for 6.5 years, you just kind of get, okay, we're just hanging on. Mm-hmm. I think when things change, so the changing time periods, 13, 14, or 21, or now, most people are perceiving that we ought to be trending downward in land values. And so my data doesn't say that yet. I did talk to some folks at the Farmland Capital Alliance meeting out in California last week. One is a large brokerage out of Iowa. And his opinion was, that you could see Illinois farmland values down 20%, Damian, 20% this year.
That's so honestly, from January 1, using a calendar year, in 9.5 to 10 months, we might have dropped 20% on Illinois farmland value.
I really think that was the prediction going forward. So I think it's from now, September, to next spring, you could see land values trending down upwards of 20%. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an overstatement. But you can look at what the Purdue numbers say. And the Purdue chart here, the 3 land qualification levels. You got the top land in the light blue, the navy is the average land, and the green is the below average land. Purdue has it broken down by a bunch of regions. This is the overall state value. And today, the land values moved up. This is June to June. So as of June 25, farmland values are still showing very strong. If I move on then to, I struggle with this, don't I?
So on a numbers basis, there's a lot of folks that would say, I'm surprised it's holding up as well as it is. And you covered this in our June webinar, Mr. Halderman, but I think first off, there's always a lag. So I guess, and you'll get to your predictions moving into the next year, like the Illinois prediction was. But it's probably a little early on to have seen this, even based on the market or the sentiment, right?
It is a little bit too early, and our data, and I'm struggling with this for some reason. So there's that chart. Okay, so here's the 24 chart, Damien, and that was a year of strength. That was last year. We ended the year really well in the fourth quarter, where land values after the election strengthened.
Mhm.
So really, what you're all interested in is what's 25 done. And so I just told you, prediction is Illinois farmland values might drop 20%. We are now 9 months through 2025, and our data, our actual sales data, and Damien, you always remind me to describe what is WAPI. That's weighted average productivity index. And for those, just as a reminder, we take our farms that we sell that are 90% cropland or more, and we divide the sale price by the productivity index of the soils, and we come up with so many dollars per corn bushel of productivity index. And you can see throughout the year so far, year to date, this includes 3 auctions last week. This shows the data as showing the market is still moving upward. So if we look at over a timeline, go back to 2013, and we traded at $50 for a long period of time, 6 years. That was that blah period I talked about a minute ago. 2022, all-time high farmland values. If 25 ended today, nominally, we are higher than we were in 2022. 2022 was the record farm income year in the history of the United States, inflation adjusted. So it stands to reason that should be the high. 25 is nominally higher. I would argue that if you adjust for inflation, Damien, we would be below the 22 price.
It's probably fair. It's probably fair to say that the rampant inflation happened about between mid-late 2020 until about 2022. We've had a leveling off. So using real numbers and inflation adjusted, that 2025, your numbers are a touch higher. Is it fair to say that even though it's higher nominally, 2022 might have been an inflation adjustment 15 to 20% more?
Yes, could have been. And that would be, that might be, seems high to me.
Yeah,
But
maybe 10, maybe 10.
yeah. So definitely, if it was 10%, that's $8. And I think 22 was in the 86 range. So that would put 25 at 78, and we're actually at 88 nominally. So somewhere in that 78 to 80 range, which is still a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the reality of what we're seeing now. This is what folks are feeling. So, this data is real data, sales data. This is what folks are telling Purdue when Purdue surveys 400 farmers across the country, and they say, how are you feeling about agriculture today? Are you willing to make capital investments like tractors or combines or grain storage or buy an additional farm? And you can see after the election, there was a big upswing last fall. And then we kind of bounced around a little bit pretty positively throughout the summer. The last 2, 3 months, when the reality of lower commodity prices and lower row crop incomes hit, you see this declining. And livestock incomes are still very good. So if you are in a heavy livestock area, that's going to insulate you to some degree.
So,
But if
by the
you're
way,
in a
this number, Mr. Halderman, it's sentiment, and I think it's always
yes,
important since we try to cover everything here, and you got great numbers. There's a lot of things that are not just pure numbers, not pure science, because humans are emotional, and so this sentiment meter does does end up impacting things like purchases. It does impact things like competition for farm ground, et cetera, because of the emotional factor. I mean, this is a sentiment meter, which it's scientific in how they pull it, but it's not scientific as in it's not directly related to uh, a database of sales. It's a sentiment thing, right?
correct. And you're exactly right. Emotion. Why do we take a farm to auction? Because emotion gets
Mhm.
into the competition, and sometimes that drives price higher. Well, what happens when you get a sentiment index that's kind of dropping down and farmers feel a little more cautious? Well, it becomes a little more challenging for them to justify that extra bid, and so maybe prices soften a little bit. So that's why I show that. Now, here's a chart that came out Monday, and you can't see the logo up in the corner probably, but that's the National Corn Growers Association. This isn't some small state group. This is NCGA. And they surveyed 1,000 farmers, and 80% said, are we on the brink of a farm crisis? Yes, or maybe. 80%. So this is row crop agriculture. I want to be real clear because livestock is actually doing very, very well. Beef prices all-time high, pork prices pretty strong. So it really, livestock is doing well, but it is tough in the row crop space. And that's what you see reflected here. Now, change in net farm income. So I talked about 2022 being the all-time high. If you can't read these numbers, all you need to know is if it's yellow or red or some shade of red, it's not good. It's a negative number. And so the change in net farm income from 22 to 24, Indiana is down 47%.
Yeah.
Ohio down 34%. Illinois down 48%. Now, there are some areas, basically the Southern Great Plains, that actually have some positive news. Yeah. But generally speaking, the row crop net farm income is down over the last 3 years.
So the Corn Belt, the traditional Corn Belt, Howard, is, you just talk about the I-states and Nebraska, but it's as though Nebraska's holding up better, and I'm guessing that's going to be beef related.
Probably.
And Kansas is beef related, and Wisconsin, I'm guessing, is beef/dairy related. Why those numbers have held up better than, say, the I-states. But what's Ohio's factor for being 13 points better than Indiana? It doesn't seem like it would be much different.
Yeah, I don't know, Damien, if that would factor in a little more diversity of crops, veg crops, some of that might influence that. Because, right, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, very close, 47 to 53% range. And so they're all in that range. I think that probably reflects a different crop mix.
Minnesota, which you don't cover as much of Minnesota, those numbers are, am I reading that right? 69% down
Correct.
Net farm income in Minnesota. That might be as bad as any traditional corn and soybean state.
Yeah, it could be. And that there you're talking heavily corn, soybean, and then you get into the wheat, sugar beets, and the like.
Right.
Again, crop mix would factor into that. So when you hear people talk about, well, yeah, we think farmland values are going to soften, here's why. Because it really comes down to farm incomes. Now, I think we'll talk about rents at this point. If you're a landowner out there, and we've had some of our landowners say to us, Howard, I really can't lower my rent. I understand that farm incomes are down, but my cost of owning farms, my real estate taxes, my insurance, my repair expenses, whatever those might be, are all up. And so my costs are going up, but I just don't feel like my rent, can come down because it just isn't covering what it used to. If that's where you are, you're exactly right. These are the Purdue charts on cash rents. So again, this is an opinion survey, but gosh, nominally, we're at the all-time high of rents. You look at the chart, you're at the all-time high, somewhere $320 an acre. But I would argue the high in rents, if you adjust for inflation, was easily 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
That's 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So rents have not kept up with inflation. If you'll recall that first chart I showed, which was the Purdue land value chart, that's a big hockey stick move up. Yeah. That has outpaced inflation, but rents have not. So if it feels like, gosh, my rents just aren't going as far as they used to, that is exactly the factor. I surveyed our staff on rents. So we've talked a little bit about land values. I think land values are going to remain fairly steady. We're seeing land values actually kind of fairly strong through the year, but I think steady is probably our word as we go forward for the Eastern Corn Belt. This is the cash rent results. They're also steady. I surveyed all of our staff. So you got 23 area representatives that contribute to this. And you can see the theme is, results of any 26 cash rent negotiations so far this year, it's steady. Will you increase cash rents? Well, 3 said they might, 2 said they might lower. So that kind of balances out again to not much change. So I wanted to show that to folks because this is fresh data this is as of September 1st. So I think that's going to be where our position is as a company. Now, there's going to be tweakings. We do a lot of the cash flex leases, so base rent may change a little bit or base gross revenue may get tweaked. But I think we're going to largely be steady year over year. So that's kind of my thoughts. Now, back on the land values, could I make a bullish argument? I talked about in the 24 chart that we saw a little bit of uptick in the fourth quarter. That was after the election when an unknown became a known. Could that happen again in 25? Is it possible that we've already seen the low in corn and soybean prices? Is it possible that one of two things happens? Either A, we come up with a trade deal with China, and that trade deal with China results in some sales of soybeans or corn going out to them, and that adds to the corn or soybean price. Or B, the federal government says we got to do market facilitation payments again because the national corn growers say they're in a farm crisis. There were 400 rice guys in Arkansas that showed up, and they were arguing they've got a farm crisis, which they do. We've got to provide some subsidies out here. I had a professor from the University of Illinois, Bruce Sherrick. He said 50 to 60 billion dollars of additional subsidies. I don't think those two things happen both. It's not an and. It's either you get some trade with China, which enhances our commodity prices, or you get some help from the federal government. But lower interest
By the way,
rates.
both of those tend to be bullish for land values, but I'm going to guess that you're saying it doesn't take it to another level, but it
No,
maintains it at this level.
maintains. Exactly. So I think you could see a little higher commodity prices. I think interest rates have come down a little bit. That's bullish. So I can make a bullish argument for sales in November and December. Remains to be seen, but that's where we are. We're steady to maybe slightly downward, but I could also be bullish if a couple of those things were to happen.
Couple of thoughts. Remember, we do this every quarter. December 3rd is the next Holderman Maximize Your Farmland webinar, and that will be. I'm thinking. You tell me. We're going to know a great deal more just between in that next 2.5 months because of your University of Illinois professor's prediction, which you and I both probably would agree with that. Probably more likely than big moves on trade, but there's going to be a raft of money that comes out here to agriculture that will, nobody likes it, but it will prop up the stuff. And we're going to probably have a lot bigger handle on that by the December 3rd webinar, I would think.
Yes, and we will also have gone through, I think, 15 auctions that we have scheduled for November right now. Yeah. It seems like the last 2 or 3 years, our fourth quarter has been our biggest quarter of sales. And we probably talked about that on previous webinars, that really the first quarter used to be, now it's really the transition to the fourth quarter. By that time, we will have a very good indication of, we'll know what the yields were. We'll know what prices have done post-harvest, which last year we got a pretty decent increase. And we'll also know if the federal government has stepped in either with helping on the trade side or with what I would call market facilitation payments, because that's what they were called the last time.
Last time we saw that was between 2018 and 2020, correct?
Correct.
So using your historical reference there, it did tend to, we didn't see big declines after those MFP payments started coming in through in about 2018. Am I right?
You are correct. And if you think back to 2018, we had 3+ years of negative farm incomes or flat farm incomes, and it was setting up for another decline down in land values. And I think market facilitation payments, and then they basically extended to COVID. Now, I'm not wishing COVID on anyone, but because they extended into COVID and you got the PPP payments, and then that led right into phase 1 trade agreement with China, which sent commodity prices higher. So that 2018 to 2020 time period, we stayed steady on land values because of those 3 factors, not because farm incomes were great. That didn't happen until really 21. But it was that market facilitation payment, the COVID PPP payments, combined with then the phase 1 of the trade agreement that got us there.
I want to. Granted, I have my own opinion that there's a lot of folks out here that think if we just somehow sold more stuff to China, that we'd all be back into $15 beans. And I've kind of pointed out a few realities, and I think that we've got to be honest with all of our folks that don't maybe keep up with the agricultural economics as much as you and I. Brazil's producing 57% more soybeans on 42% more acres than they did just 1 decade ago.
Right.
I think that we probably need to be honest with ourselves as an industry and just admit that we're not going to, the golden era of us just making more soybeans and putting them on a ship to China is that ship is done sailing. And I think that will end up. My prediction would be a steady, but not a big uptick on real estate over the next couple of years if it's dependent on the China situation. Your assessment?
Oh, I agree absolutely. I think 25% of our soybean exports go to China, I think it's 25% of our soybeans go to China as exports.
Right.
They buy September, October, November, December from us. They buy the rest of the year from Brazil, and they're proving this year they haven't bought any yet in September, so they're proving this year they can buy it all from Brazil. So for us to think that that's going to displace and other people will have to buy from us because China's not, well, that's not the case because Brazil has ramped up their production so much to really offset what that displacement might cause. So I would agree with you that that is not the end solution. I think renewable diesel. I think President Trump seems very focused on domestic consumption, creating domestic demand. We'll see. That I think is going to be a key element in both corn and soybeans as we go forward.
And also, they just bought some off of Argentina. So anyway,
that was what announced this morning.
Yeah, I had to be the bear to counter your bull because remember we talk about economics here. Last thought on real estate. I mean, like you said, I think tune in December 3rd because you're going to have a bunch of fresh data with 15 auctions you're conducting in November, and we're also going to have a better read on, like you said, yields, year-end analysis, and then also the government situation.
Yeah. So final thought. One of the other things I mentioned in the last couple of days is the volatility that we see in the land market. Nolan, who's sitting across from me and facilitating the meeting today, Nolan is the area representative who has both the highest per bushel WAPI score this year and the lowest. And Nolan, I think it was about a $90 per bushel difference. Keep in mind our average for the year is less than 90. That is a huge range. So he sold a farm at $134 per corn bushel and $42 per corn bushel. Now, folks, the tight range is 75 to 100, with the average right around 88. Okay, so that's the average, but the range is huge, and I think that's indicative of the market we see today. Is that you're going to have farms that are challenged because of soils, and we're going to get into that with Abby here in a second. Because of reputation, because of the way they're managed, because of location. And they might be on that lower end of the scale. So that's the value of what Halderman can bring to you is where is your farm located in that range? And if it's a premium farm, well managed, well maintained, good location, it could easily be above $88. We've proven that. And the other thing would be supply that has sold in the area. So those are some considerations. We're just seeing more volatility because I think as the in-farm incomes have gotten weaker, maybe we haven't gone down in value, but people are more choosy. And it's easier today to say, I don't have to have that below average farm. And that might be reflected in price.
And that's the other takeaway is when there's less interest, not interest rates, in human interest, appeal. When appeal goes down, the ones that get less appealing faster are below average chunks of ground. Isn't that kind of your historical? Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So be sure to tune in December 3rd because we're going to have a lot more information on markets. We're going to go to Abby Holliker now. She's the owner and CEO of Nickel Plate Consulting. It turns out I spoke to at least one or two of her meetings with the Amplify Group. I think we did in Ohio and we did it in Texas. Which one were you at? Both of them? Your microphone's off. That's okay. Your mic's off. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it was at both.
Got it. She's going to talk to you about soil. And as we said in the intro, are you maximizing your farm soil? You just heard a lot of great information from Howard about markets and marketplace and the numbers, et cetera. And what did you also hear? There could be a tremendous difference in value of a sale based on it doesn't even matter about the soil, but the point is you've got to maximize your farmland soil. Maybe you rent it out, maybe you own it. The main thing is here, it's a very valuable asset, and we know that there's been a history, unfortunately, in agriculture going from the Dust Bowl to the T by 2000, which was the big initiative by the government 25, 35, 40 years ago. We still have a lot of care that we can take with our soil. So she's going to talk to you about all that stuff. She's got a presentation. So here we go.
Yeah, they
Navigating agronomy and economic hardship.
that's what we're in right now. We're given the prices that we're given. But the thing that we always have to go back to is the basics. And the basics is soil. And what do we have in our soil and how can we use it to work for us and not against us? So some of the things that I'm going to take you through is the building blocks. So our TEC, our calcium, our magnesium, our potassium, our nitrogen, our sulfur, our phosphorus, and what are those actually doing, and how can we actually manage those in a more profitable way? So I'm going to take you through here. I'm going to build a tractor with you, Damien. We don't get to pick our tractor. We either have a 200 horsepower tractor, a 400, 600 horsepower. That's our TEC. That's the size of our tractor. So it's either we have a more sandy soil, which is a 200 horsepower tractor. It can't hold as much. It doesn't have as much power, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work and we can't get it to work for us. But we can get into those higher organic matters and clay soils also in Indiana and in Illinois and a little bit into Michigan and Ohio. And we can get into those 600 horsepower tractors and how do we get those to work for us. But you got to know your tractor before you can actually get the soil to work for you. So when we're looking at that TEC, that'll be on your soil report either as TEC, CEC. It's pretty much interchangeable, those words. It's a little bit different science behind it. But for us common people, it's pretty much the same thing. But that's all of where our holding capacity is. So where all of our nutrients go and get held onto and then get picked up by our plant root system. The next thing is we got to have a frame of our tractor. So that's our calcium. That's what builds strong cell walls. That's what makes sure that when we have fruit, say we're on tomato production, we have quite a bit of that in Indiana. That makes sure that our skin of our tomato is not leaking any of the juices outside. So if we have higher calcium, we can have stronger cell walls, not be able to have weak plants or corn stalks falling over. That is the key part of our frame is our calcium. On a soil tester, you'd like to see that from 70 to 75% if you have a base buffer pH on there. If you don't have a buffer pH, you like to see that at anywhere from 65 to 70%. And that's
What does
off of
that?
our
What do those percentages mean? 65, 70% what? Just for the
base
person.
saturation. So the
Gotcha.
amount of so we'll go into that as calcium, magnesium, potassium, hydrogen, and then a lot of other nutrients. But those are our main ones that go in. You only have 100%. You can't have more. And what that is showing is we want to balance out those base nutrients. And in that, when we balance them, we'll get our soil to work for us and not against us. And I'll show you in some economics here later about how that base saturation can actually work against us and how we can correct that.
Okay.
Our magnesium is also one of those percents. It's the paint job. It's what keeps that frame nice. It doesn't allow rust in, it doesn't allow it to degrade that calcium. The beautiful thing about the magnesium is it's what generates chlorophyll. So our chlorophyll is a large molecule. Right in the center of that chlorophyll is a big magnesium. That is actually what makes our plant green. It takes in red and blue light and it reflects green light. It's not our nitrogen that makes our plant green. It's our magnesium. That's what generates our chlorophyll, and that's what really makes our plant go. That's what's capturing our sunlight. So that's our paint job on our tractor. Our potassium, that's all the fun things. The AC, the radio, the trim, that's what moves the sugars. Our potassium is leachable, so that is something that we really have to pay attention to because it can leave our system. Here in central Indiana, where I'm at, we got into there in May, 14 inches plus of rainfall in 10 days. What I saw as that rainfall was coming down was our potassium leaving our system, and that this year our farmers are going to have to pay a little bit of catch up with that potassium because our numbers were going to decrease that year because we were leaving our system. And when I say leaving our system, I mean it's going deeper into our soil profile so that our roots aren't able to pick it up as much.
Got
We
it.
have to have our fuel in our engine. That's our nitrogen. That's the building block of proteins. So we have to have nitrogen because it builds all of our proteins, which then runs our enzymatic reactions, which then is what keeps the potassium moving through the plant. Those sugars then will go into our corn, soybeans, tomatoes, whatever we're producing, mint up in northern Indiana. We will need to be able to have nitrogen, but you can't overflow your system with nitrogen because your fuel tank on these tractors are only so big. You can only hold on to so much. It's leachable. You can put in any type of stabilizer or sulfur, some other things that will adhere to that nitrogen to keep it into the soil longer. But we need to have nitrogen. We just can't overflow the system, and we don't need to overflow the system because we can get a lot of our vehicles, tractors, to work for us. Less nitrogen on those 200 horsepower tractors. You feed it more, you have to make more stops, fill it up. Those 600 horsepower tractors, we can put in more nitrogen. It will stay longer because of that organic matter and clay molecules. But do we need to? Can we get that tractor to actually work for us and give us and be more efficient with our nitrogen? We have to have a transmission. That's what moves all of our energy into that tractor, all through the tractor. That's our phosphorus. Our phosphorus is our transmission. It moves everything throughout that plant. It makes sure it's part of ATP and ADP. Those are our energy proteins in our plant. They all have phosphorus in them. ATP is like a charged battery. ADP is like it's a depleted battery, and it'll go back into being a charged battery. We have to have phosphorus. We like to see that phosphorus at 40 parts per million minimum. So that's where our threshold is. That's where on our soil test we start to look at, do we need to apply phosphorus, or can we actually go and do a zero application here because we have enough phosphorus in our soil? And I'll get into that a little bit deeper, and I'll show some economics on phosphorus, on what we can really do with it, and describe a little bit deeper on truly what is phosphorus in our soil. And there are two different pieces of phosphorus.
I want to make sure that anybody has a question. Obviously, we're getting into the technical stuff. If you have a question, type it in. We'll make sure that Abby addresses it. And I have a question. Howard, I'm going to just go ahead and throw it out there. As a guy that owns farmland and rents it out, I actually don't look at soil samples. Shame on me, slap my wrist. I'm assuming that one of the things that your 26 reps do is monitor the analysis of soils on some kind of an every 2 or 3 year basis.
Exactly. Yeah, we want to make sure that I've heard it called a bank, and Abby's referring to it as a tractor, and that's really what is a productive asset. But when we look at farmland, you've got the basic soil that you cannot change, but you can certainly influence all these different levers with the fertility. And you can either be making deposits and increasing your fertility or taking withdrawals. And we want to make sure every 3 years at least that we get a soil test that shows us, are we continuing to at least stay steady or making some deposits into that bank account? We really don't want to see that soil test being withdrawn. And that's really the goal for us. And that comes back to you as better yields. You'll have more productive land. Your farm will get a reputation.
Yeah.
You know, how many times at an auction have I heard, Damien, somebody say to me, I've never seen a fertilizer truck across that field? What they're suggesting is that they haven't taken care of these various attributes that Abby's talking about. And so that's really the goal from a reputation standpoint. I want to have great production because that's better for my tenant. My tenant's going to get better yields. He's going to make more money. And likewise, it's better for my farm if I were to ever sell it.
I look at my soil samples, but I'm I'm guilty. I do look at them. I'm not as knowledgeable as somebody like Abby, and I think this. I'm sitting here going through all this and thinking, yeah, you do have. There's a place for experts on this like her because of these things we're talking about. Because if you said what are the parts per million supposed to be, I don't think that I'm not sure most farmers know, let alone farm owners.
Correct. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
That's why I get paid the big dollars.
There you go. That's right.
So we have this tractor sitting out there, but the only way to make a move is if you turn it on. The only thing that will turn this on is sulfur. It's your keys. You have to have sulfur. We've all heard some talk about how we have less acid rain because we clean the air. That's great. I love that we cleaned up the air, but the side effect to that is that we don't get free sulfur anymore. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but we can work with that. We just have to make sure that each year 20 to 30 parts per million. So in layman terms, that's going out with 150 pounds of AMS, so a nitrogen sulfur product. That gives you roughly around 24 pounds of sulfur. That's where we want to see to be able to get these plants to work. And that's across the board for almost all plants. Some specialty crops need more, but for corn and soybeans, wheat, 20 to 30 parts per million, 24 pounds of sulfur. That's what we need to be able to churn on this tractor and actually get everything to work, because sulfur is the key to enzymatic activity. It's attached to every single enzyme that has to move throughout that plant. And without your keys, this will not work. You will be at more of a kind of just stable yield. But when you put the keys on and you get that tractor moving, you will be able to really push yield here. And when I say yield, I mean profitability, because we can go as high as we want, but if we aren't profitable, it doesn't matter.
Damien, did you know that acid rain actually had some benefit?
I did know that, and I never thought of it. And by the way, Abby is referencing us all acid rain. She's too young to even remember it. I mean, that was an '80s thing. That was a 1980s thing, and she wasn't even around back then. So remember, if you got questions for Abby or about your farm soil, because you know what did you hear from Howard? Obviously, you got vast differences in the state of Indiana, from high to low end type farm ground, whatever. But all of it can be productive. More importantly, all of it can be profitable if you're managing it right. And that's where somebody like Abby comes in on this. So
Abby, you
continue
took this
here.
picture on Damien's farm, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. His soil is completely out of balance. So this is what happens when you don't have your soil in balance. You're creating a tractor that looks like this, and how easy is it to farm with something that looks like this? I mean, it barely has a steering wheel. We have a rear tire on the front end of it. We really need to rebalance it out and fix some of these nutrients, because once you fix them and get them back into equilibrium, that's where soil wants to live. It's a living matter. It wants to be in this even keel so that everything flows back and forth. If we start to get it out of whack, then it works harder and it works against us. So we
Abby,
want
my extreme ag guys that I do my other work with says the myth of it being depleted. Howard says the farmer at the auction says, I've never seen a fertilizer truck across that field. And that could be a little bit of judgy neighbor, whatever. But some of my farm guys say it's less about depletion. It's not really that farms get mined, but they do get out of balance. And that's to your point about that image right there. What thing is usually off? My guess is it's never nitrogen, because if you're a farmer, by golly, you Howard's nodding his head. You're supposed to fling nitrogen. By golly, it's all about nitrogen. I'm guessing most soils are over nitrogened and under macros. What thing is off that you see the most in your consulting business?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things off is that calcium and magnesium ratio. And I actually have some economics after I think I got some Fosters before it, but the calcium magnesium is usually the first thing. So what I usually see is that everybody's attuned to, I got to look at the water pH. That if there's anything that anybody looks on a soil test, they look right at that pH and they say, well, it's not 6.3, so I need to apply lime because it's 5.8. And that's not true. The first thing you should be looking at is that calcium percent and magnesium percent. And if that's in balance and we have enough calcium, and you are in a larger exchange, let's say 15. This isn't true about sands. You have to manage those a little bit differently. You're at a 15 exchange. If you have the calcium and you have the magnesium, your water pH does not matter, because you have enough calcium pounds in that soil to buffer that soil. So you'll see a buffer pH on there. And if my buffer pH is over 7.0, that means that soil actually has the capability of fixing itself. That water pH from the beginning of the crop season to the end crop season, I can take a soil test every single day and I'll see that water pH go all the way down to a 5.5, all the way to a 7.2. And that's our soil living. And it's showing that it's trying to buffer and take care of the soil. And that is always a moving target, the water pH. So to make a recommendation off of a moving target, it's sometimes a shot in the dark. Sometimes it works. It always works on sands when you're in those lower exchanges, because your tractor's not big enough to be able to work for it. But yeah, the calcium magnesium is one of the first things that I would look at, Davian.
Okay, so out of balance, and so a person that's not an agronomist like you uh, should get some help, and then say out of balance. Generally, the first thing is the calcium magnesium ratio.
Yes. Yeah. And so when we put it in balance, it looks more like this. It looks like a tractor that'll work for us. All the pieces are in the right place. We have them fully, and it's all going to start moving just beautifully with us.
I'm going to ask you another question then about the reality of this. Um, am I right? Is nitrogen the most over applied? Because whether you're first off, owners I think like this. If you're an owner and you don't know that much agronomically, and you have a tenant, you just want to make sure that they are putting on the macros, and it tends to be. I'm guessing you're going to tell me there's stuff that's in excess supply, and there's stuff that's absolutely undersupplied, and it's probably long term getting your soil out of balance.
Yes, yeah. On excess, it is nitrogen. One of the biggest things is, let's take the example, we had that 14 inches of rain. The first thing that comes in your mind is that that nitrogen left us, because what are we taught? That nitrogen will not stay. And so when that happens, I get called out. We take a test that tests nitrate, ammonia, and then I go in and test mineralization. And our mineralization is our reserve of nitrogen that is inside the soil that all of our microbial activity is working on releasing so that it can be utilized into that plant. And when I went out this year and we took soil tests and we came back, that 14 inches of rain, I had customers that we ranged from 10 inches of rain to that 14 inches of rain, and none of them had a recommendation to go back in and apply nitrogen. And we carried that crop through the whole entire year, did not see any type of nitrogen deficiency in the plant, and we kept on thriving.
I'm gonna keep
Two
asking the
reasons
question.
for,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
or I would say two reasons for that. One of them, over applied in the beginning, so
Yep.
we had some to lose. So we banked. I heard Howard use that word. We banked some nitrogen,
Mhm.
and we just gave it to charity, which it's a beautiful thing. It's a nice thing, but when we're looking to be profitable in our soil, it's not always the greatest, 'cause it's not the best charity to give to. Um, and then we also had a really nice season where we stayed consistent, where we were moist in our soil and we were warm. And when we're like that, we have microbial activity that starts to give us nutrients that were not available to us when we first started, when we were cold. And we had a lot more mineralization this year. And so our soil was working for us. And the farmers that we tested, we were able to save them money, to be more profitable that year by not going in with another nitrogen application.
The word bank that he used, I actually have heard it from some pretty agronomically oriented folks that in this business, that there's this myth that you can go out there and just put tons and tons of fertility out and it'll stay around your soil for a long time. And there's compelling evidence that really just it's putting money into a bank that doesn't hold your money. And there's some truth to that, right, Abby?
There is some truth to that. And I will say that the a bank is also used for so when in times of need you use it. So I have a lot of farmers and tenants that will bank, and I say, okay, it's time to use it. Let's use our bank. And nobody wants to pull the trigger on using the bank.
Mm.
And I know it's hard. We got that beautiful nest egg. I have it too. I don't want to use it. I want to see it grow. But at some point, we want to use it. It was ours to use, and we should be able to use it. And using it doesn't mean we are going to deplete it. We don't want to deplete it, but we can utilize some of that we have put in there, because it's ours to use.
All right, remember, you can type in your questions and Abby will address them. Biggest mistake you see, biggest easily corrected mistake that you see in your consulting work.
Yeah, so it's knowing what really phosphorus is and how we can and make it work for us. I'm going to take you through a little bit of technical terms, and then I'm going to tie you into actual economics, and we can see how this really plays out. So phosphorus, we have two forms of phosphorus. We have labile and non-labile pools. When we know these, we can increase our profitability and our sustainability of the soil. Our labile phosphorus, that's what shows up on your soil test. It's what's water soluble, it's ready to use, It is the nutrient pack that that plant needs. Our non-labile pool is what works for us. It's what wants to stay in equilibrium. It's when you hear those talks that people say, we have phosphorus for the whole entire eternity. We never need to apply any more phosphorus. That's the phosphorus they're talking about is non-labile. Is it true? Do we need to not apply? Can we just use what's left? Not necessarily, because our labile is what's coming out of that fertilizer truck. That immediately goes into the labile pool where you can easily use it. It's what fills up our roots. So it's like having a small bucket of fertilizer right next to those roots. It just pours right in. But our non-labile is locked in soil minerals and organic matter. So it's in our rocks, it's in our sticks, and it takes our microbes to break that down. Now, are they going to be able to break down large boulders over time? Yes, but that's going to take a lot of time. None of us will be here to ever see that. So we do have to apply some phosphorus, but how much do we actually really need to apply because we have this non-labile that is working for us in replacing phosphorus as we remove it in grain, as that corn comes off, as that soybean, as that wheat comes off. That phosphorus does leave, but it doesn't necessarily leave in the amount that we think it's leaving because we do have this other supply trying to replenish us and stay in equilibrium. So just a little takeaway, we have this fertilizer that fills the labile pool and the crops get to use it right away. Then we have non-labile pool that solely refills our phosphorus that our crops can remove. Our soil tests measure what those plants are using, and we need to make sure that our farmers know that we don't need to over apply. We can keep it in balance and be sustainable with this non-labile pool. So can we go with without dry pea fertilizer? Absolutely. But doesn't mean we can't go 3 years in a row with no dry fertilizer. But in a time where our guys are getting priced $940 a ton, which is high. We're getting close to $1,000 a ton. And these guys are applying this ton in 150 pounds, 200 pounds an acre. So you get to a ton pretty quickly on operations. We can go without it. And that is only saying because of the economic time we're in. It's not saying we're going to deplete the soil. And when we see that 40 parts per million, the next year, that 40 parts per million isn't really going to change because we had that non-labile P coming in. We had a great mineralization year. But if we don't use dry pea, what do we do during the planting season? Because we are going in those cool, wet soils most of the time, and we're not getting that mineralization. So when we come to planting decisions, when you're cool and wet, you apply supplemental P. When you're cool and dry, you apply supplemental P. When you're warm and no moisture, you have to apply supplemental P. The only time you don't really have to apply when you're trying to cut back your phosphorus is when you're warm and adequate moisture because you're mineralizing. And that supplemental P will look in liquid form, 1034O, a season pass. Everybody has some type of phosphorus product that goes in with your starter in either your Infer or 2x2 system. But that gets that plant just jump started because you do need that transmission. And if you're wet or cold, you don't necessarily always have that transmission going for you, and you do still need to apply it. So it doesn't mean we're going completely without phosphorus. It means we're just changing our mindset and saying, hey, this is a new situation we're in. Let's think about this upcoming growing season. Let's alter it a little bit without depleting, without lowering, and get by this year so that we can continue on and continue to see profitability.
All right. I got the beginning of a question from Joe. He says, Abby, comma, you're going to fill in the rest of that, Joe, because until you type some words and put a question mark, I can't ask her what that is. All right. I want to ask a couple of questions here while you're going on. By the way, I like your images. First off, the mistakes that you see, and Howard needs to hop in here also, that are soil and agronomic mistakes that you see for either farmers make or just investors make. First off, Howard, maybe you want to go because you see a lot of things from a different perspective from a pure agronomic.
Yeah, I think the the biggest mistake would be to lease the farm very to different people on a rapid turnover rate. So every year you're bidding it out. Every year, every 2 years, you've got a change in tenancy.
Because everyone treats it like a rental car
And they treat it like a rental car. And
or
so what do
or a
they
rock
do?
band in a hotel room, maybe even worse, right?
Maybe even worse. So in Abby's world, what they're doing is they're putting on some nitrogen if they're growing corn, but they're not putting on much else. And so they're depleting that bank. And as that goes over time, it doesn't happen in 1 year, but over a period of time, then those yields and that really the soil starts to become depleted. The other thing that you don't get is taking care of the soil from an organic matter standpoint. And Abby hasn't talked a lot about organic matter, but that's really holds a lot of moisture, it holds a lot of nutrients. And if you get your organic matter depleted over time, that's problematic. So the third thing would be lack of rotation. Now, a lot of our crops in the Midwest, it's corn this year and soybeans next, or it's corn after corn. Those generally aren't a problem. It's when you see consistent soybeans year after year after year. And that you can skimp on because soybeans manufacture their own nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you might not see any fertilizer go on. So those would be some things that are clues. But it really starts with creating a long-term tenancy relationship with somebody who has a great reputation, and then creating a win-win, meaning they have to make money and the landowner makes money. And when you have that kind of relationship, then your farm's going to improve over time because that farmer will invest in the farm, meaning they'll make some deposits into that bank, and they'll do it with proper economics in mind. But that farm improves over time as a result.
So rapid turnover of tenant, and then the depletion of organic matter, and then the third one was the how'd you start? You started that one with?
Not creating a win-win in your lease
Yeah, right.
situation.
The economic aspect of
Yep.
it. By the way, I want to get to the organic matter discussion also with Abby, but you have a question from Joe. What nutrients do you find are overapplied most often? I think you said nitrogen's probably the biggie, although probably it could be all the macros, but you tell me.
Yeah.
And then it says, how do they go about cutting back when margins are tight?
Yeah, so that leads us in. So what if we're not comfortable with no application? How can we cut back some? I do see nitrogen overapplied quite a bit, but I will say I see phosphorus overapplied quite a bit. So this is a client that agreed that he would share some of his data, and as you can see, we don't run a crop removal rate. That's a different type of rate, but we run a slightly conservative rate with no zero application. And over time, we have seen that we have increased his phosphorus numbers substantially. That 40 parts per million where we have to have it at, that's all the way at the bottom. We are over 40 parts per million. We have a lot of phosphorus that we can start utilizing because this is just our first bucket of phosphorus. This is not even our second bucket of our reserve phosphorus that we're seeing. And so how does that actually economically play out? And how can we see these numbers, but be a little bit even more conservative this and still see that increase, that trend line going up? Because everybody likes a trend line that's going up when it's going to the positives. So how can we actually see this? So I'm going to take you through some economics here now, and I'm going to show you 3 different fertilizer applications and how that really affects our pocket. So the picture you're seeing on the far right, that is his soil test results. Everything's over that 40 parts per million. We are good to go on this farm. The left is the application that we are making this year. So what's that saying is 100 pounds an acre where you see 180 pounds an acre where you see 80. Now, I will disclaim this is going through strip till bar. So most guys wouldn't spread out the back 80 pounds because their spread pattern isn't made for that. So this is going through strip till. If we were going to go strictly off of crop removal, so if you say, hey, I made 220 bushel corn this year, how much phosphorus was removed and what do I need to apply? We would go through and we'd say it needs 150 pounds of MAP per acre. We're going to decrease it because it's going through a strip till bar. So it's 120 pounds of MAP through a strip till. Off of this field, which is 64 acres, that's 3.84 tons of fertilizer that has to get applied. We are at $940 a ton a MAP on average. That's $3,600 we're spending on this field just solely on phosphorus. That then let's say, all right, what does his actually cost? He's a conservative, but no zero application. He's at 2.85 tons. That's $2,600. I walk in the door, all right, what can we actually do to keep our numbers stable and slightly increasing with a build, but also utilize our bank? We're at 1.24 tons, $1,100. So what are we saying there? That when we go from crop removal to the application that this farmer is making, that's $14.54 of a savings per acre. If we move from the conservative, his no zero application, down to the equilibrium and maintenance rack of nickel plate, we're saving $23.65. If I go to a client that has been doing crop removal, we go from a crop removal rate to a nickel plate rate off of this field, we're saving $38.19 an acre. And that's not because we're depleting the soil or taking our phosphorus away. That's because we are not only slowly building the soil so that we can see those soil tests rise, but on a more slower build that's a little easier on the pocket. And we are also using that bank. So when we see results like 80 parts per million, we can slowly decrease that over many years of time. And decrease, I mean that it might move to 75 parts per million at some point, and utilize that non-labile P that is coming back to replace. And these are just some of the examples that we can start to really use our soil tests to work for us and not keep on throwing money out where it really doesn't need to be. Because what that savings mean is now we can move that money into another budget. Maybe that goes into our herbicide budget. Maybe that goes into a liming budget, that now we can really make that money work for us and be able to still continue to see this ground thrive and become even more profitable.
So Abby, the economist in me wants to know, okay, you're going to save me maybe 25 to $38 an acre. What's your cost? If nickel plate comes out and does this analysis work for me, how much am I going to spend to get this kind of
Yeah,
great results?
yeah, so I work with clientele on the whole entire operation. We sample the ground every 2 years, so we're sampling everything like every other year, half the farm. And we work quarterly with them, so we're working through quarterly meetings. So we start at soil fertility and we go all the way out to the budgets and hiring decisions, and really just sitting as a key person at the table with them. And right now we're at 950 an acre on a auto renew contract on every single acre.
So for less than $10 an acre, we can do this thing. So the recommendation I would have is, and I was the ninth best soil judger in the nation in 1987. I like to always point that out. I was going to be an agronomist, but then I got a hold of a biochemistry book at Purdue and I changed majors before I even got there. Anyway, but anyway, I think the issue here, the big picture is get some professional consultation. I want to talk about the bigger mistakes because remember, a lot of these people, Abby, are owners and not necessarily the operators. So warning signs, red flags. Talk to me because I'm afraid we're going to start losing some people's interest on going too heavy into magnesium, et cetera. So let's go bigger picture. Let's go from the airplane seat here. What are red flags that you look for? What is a person that's not agronomically expert like you? What warning signs? What red flags? What problems do they need to be looking for?
Yeah, one of the warning signs is if we're staying stagnant on that, we're churning over the exact same thing every single year. Our bushels are exactly the same, our profitability is exactly the same. That's a warning sign that what we're doing no longer is improving, because at some point they saw a sharp incline from those practices. And now we are tabletopping. And most of the time what happens with the tabletop is that you'll start to see it actually slowly decline. And that we need to start making that jump to the next practices. So is that incorporating in cover crops?
Right.
Is that switching over to a different fertilizer practice? I have a lot of guys switching over to strip till and having a lot of success with that now. Is that looking at, all right, we have this layer balanced. Now we need to start to look at the actual micronutrients and get those balanced out now that we've fixed one
Well, the
thing.
traditional answer was to go and fling out more of NP and K,
Yeah.
and that way the landowner thought they were getting something, and then the neighbor couldn't say they never saw a fertilizer truck go across there. And we're learning that that's and generally, to Joe's question, what nutrients are found or over applied. I think we're learning that you could cut back nitrogen, period, or cut back and then just apply it 3 times through the season versus front loading it. And I think that that's probably one of your recommendations is
Mhm.
cut the amount total and also put it in split rates.
Yes.
You're the
I
agronomist here. I'm just going with what my progressive farmers tell me. Tillage. I want you to address tillage. I'm sorry. I didn't want to hear about magnesium. I'm sorry. I'm just going with this,
No,
Abby. I
you're
didn't want to hear about
fine. We can
magnesium.
talk about tillage.
All right,
Yeah,
here's my
so
assessment. Here's my assessment. Howard says depletion of organic matter. You know what I learned from the Hefty brothers at Ag PhD? One of the biggest sins against organic matter over tillage, because then it vaporizes your organic matter. Boom, boom, and there you go. And there you have less water holding capacity. And you know there's a whole bunch of problems when you have decreasing organic matter. So I think there's people that are 84-year-old widows that own farm ground and they rent it out. And the one thing that 84-year-old old Mabel knows is her husband, as soon as the combine got done, the corn picker got done, ran out there and plowed it in the fall, because by golly, that's what Elmer did. So when I rent it now to this next person, they need to do it exactly like Elmer did back in the 1970s and plow up that field as soon as the combine's done. Howard, am I accurate in that? Because I think a bunch of ground gets over-tilled, and some of it's because of what Mabel thinks it should happen on her farm ground that Elmer used to farm.
Yeah,
yes,
I think there's, yeah, go ahead, Abby.
yeah, that's exactly what happens. You see it with older landlords. That this is how it's always been done. So I want the new person to come in and do the exact same thing. You see it when you still have multiple generations on the farm, when you still have dad or grandpa.
When Elmer's still alive and it's not just Mabel?
Yes, and
Do you
when
actually have
there's
any clients named Elmer or Mabel, Abby?
I don't.
I
But
bet you Howard. I bet you Howard, at some point in his career, has had a tenant, or I'm sorry, a landowner named Mabel. I'm just going to bet.
Yeah, well, you're probably accurate because see, I've been working in at Halderman longer than Abby's been alive, so that would be a fair assessment. But so last year we had a farm half mile from our office that we owned, and if you drove by it in May, no, actually in the all winter, you drove by it, and we go by this going down to Purdue, and it's zebra striped. They planted cover crops, and I'm looking out there and I'm like, what are these strips? Well, they ended up those strips. They seeded the whole thing to a ryegrass cover crop. Then they swept off where they're going to plant the corn the next year. This is all done in the fall. Ryegrass comes up, but except for those strips, they planted the corn in those strips. They planted it when the ryegrass was 3 feet high.
Yep.
You're like, how in the world can that work? Because clean tillage, garden type of look is what we always thought we should strive for. The reality is that field was covered the entire year with some sort of cover crop. The ryegrass adds additional organic matter. Oh, by the way, that farm made 208 bushel corn last year. Mm. So it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's
and saved a pass with $4 diesel and $400,000 machine unnecessarily tilling it. And so I'm a big believer. Since we're talking acid rain here, Abby, I also believe we're going to look back someday at all the tillage that we've allowed or done, and the way we look at using leaches for healthcare. Yes, that was also a thing before acid rain. Leaches as healthcare.
Well, and they saved a herbicide pass, and that is not only dollars, but it changes a lot of things to be able to eliminate that herbicide pass, and you are now getting something living to actually do the job that you were using chemicals for.
Recommendations you have for a person that is a non-operating landowner, because that's a lot of the folks that work with Halderman. What do they? You talked about red flags. I talked about tillage. What else would you advise the person that's the owner?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I see work really well on my end is when the farmer is 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 highly communicative with the landlord. I think that creates a larger relationship. It creates more openness of exactly what's happening, and it opens doors to, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is why we are doing it. We are showing how we care, because I think a lot of times the disconnect is the farmer's not telling them how much they care, and they aren't asking, and that's when you start to see sometimes that changeover, and some of it happens for the good, and some of it is they should have stayed and been able to work with them a little bit longer. But just to have that communication of, hey, this is what's happening, this is why we're doing it, this is what we want to see, but also just having that open door policy of wanting to see those soil test results, because like you said, Howard, your guys are versed, they know how to read them, and they also know people that also know how to read them, and so they can really see what's happening in that over year soil test. You can look at one, but seeing the multi years is really what happens, is how you can see how your ground's been treated. I work with clientele, and I know every one of my guys has the best interest of that ground in mind, because that's how they stay profitable, and that's what we hope that everybody out there is doing.
Yeah,
First,
Damien, it comes down to relationships and communication, and that's really what Halderman facilitates, and what Abby does. You know, the tighter the relationship, the more communication that in any business, in any situation, any human conversation or deal, that more communication and more transparency will benefit.
last thought. We're only into fall, Abby. There's a lot of lime gets applied,
Hmm.
and I wonder, are we going to look back and say we overused lime or used the wrong kind of lime? What's your thought? Because this is the time of year where we start rolling into the thing of, oh, you know what, you'll see lime piles in the fields, and people say, what the heck is that? So talk just for a second about lime heading into fall. I think it's appropriate topic and timeliness.
Yeah, so one of the things is misuse of lime, that we think we're using it, but we're not using it to correct the right things, that we're looking at that water pH instead of that calcium percent. And so it's getting applied, but it's not necessarily getting applied in the right amounts or right areas. Doing a blanket spread of 1 ton an acre sometimes is called for, but a lot of that variable recommendation of doing 1.5, 2 tons is really what our soil needs. And we need to start looking at some of those micro environments and correcting them, and then using the wrong type of lime. So you have high cal lime, so high calcium, and then you have high mag lime, high magnesium. In my neck of the woods, and in a lot of Howard's neck of the woods, we have high magnesium soils because that's our parent material, that's our bedrock. We do not want to be applying our lime that is closest to us most of the time, because they're usually in a vein that has high magnesium. We usually spend a lot more in trucking to get that high calcium lime and to be able to apply the right nutrient. We don't want to put out nutrients that we don't need, because if we have too much magnesium in our soil, that starts to mimic compaction.
Yep.
We have smaller pore space, lower water infiltration. It takes a lot harder for that tractor to pull the planter through the ground. And we can start to see ponding from water. And as we know, we get more and more rain all at once, and we want to decrease our ponding. So if we can balance out that calcium and magnesium by using the right type of lime, we can really do some wonders for ourselves.
Just learned it 2 years ago, Howard. I just learned it 2 years ago. Your nearest lime source is probably the wrong lime source, because, to Abby's point, it's already got the same stuff that your soil has, because if it's nearby, it was your parent material. Howard,
Well,
get us out of here on this. Go ahead.
her point on variable rate is very important. And you can do soil sampling today. We can do yield monitoring by the foot. So if you have that kind of technology available, why wouldn't you apply lime by the acre?
Yeah.
And she can basically say this area needs 2 ton, this area needs none. And by doing that, you're going to save money, first of all, on your lime application. And then secondly, you're going to make your soil more balanced. And I think Abby made a really good point of balancing your soil out for maximal productivity. And that is not over applying fertilizer, over applying lime. That's balance. And that's really, I think if you seek that, you're going to save money and at the same time maximize your yields. That marginal revenue, marginal cost thing that you and I learned as ag economists, Damien, is really where we're trying to strive for.
Well, and that's where the money's made, to Joe's question over there. And, if I'm a landlord, I'm going to get some help on the soil samples because some of it's a little bit more a little more technological and technical than I'm probably capable of. But I think the discussion, the communication, as Abby talked about, but also variable rate. We have this technology, like you said, to the foot. And if they're just blanketing stuff out there, they're wasting money and they're also not doing right by your soil. So, I mean, variable rate of applications of not just lime, but really you can variable rate fertility. You can variable rate,
Seed.
you can variable rate your seeding. You can, plant in different populations based on your soil's productivity. So I think that's a big one that I would look at if I were sitting down with my farmer tenant.
Yep.
All right, we're going to do this again. By the
Good.
way, Abby, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah. So if you want to get a hold of me, I have a Twitter page, plate_nickel, and that has my contact information on it. If not, you can also contact Holderman. They have my information as well. We can get connected up and create a partnership.
Closing thoughts, Mr. Halderman.
Hey, I think it's going to be a great fall. A lot of nice yields. I wouldn't say necessarily records, but I think you'll see a lot of nice yields across the Eastern Corn Belt. I think there are going to be some challenges this winter as we get into with lower commodity prices and incomes. There will be some challenges, but that's what we're here to help landowners navigate through. So
Yeah. And we are doing this on December 3rd. It's going to be a good one because we'll have this year-end information from what Halderman Real Estate and Farm Management is doing all fall on the auction front. 15 sales they got scheduled already for November. Heck, there might even be a couple more. There's going to be a lot of news. When the big numbers come out from like the Iowa State land analysis, that's usually a January thing, I think, right?
right,
Yeah,
right.
so you won't have that until sometime in Q1. But for the December webinar, there's going to be some really good information. Obviously, then Howard's got quite a network of people that are in other states that he's got a finger on what's going on everywhere. Also, we're going to talk about timber. Most timber is okay. I don't say most. Much timber that is owned by farm owners is not really managed as well as it could be. So part of the Maximizing Your Farmland series, we decided to tackle timber. Do you have a timber consultant? Have you ever spoken with a timber consultant? Have you ever sold timber? Did you sell it at the highest price? Did you do it with a management, an eye for management for the long haul? Remember, it's a long-term asset. And there's a lot of discussion on that. Do we have Jack Seifert lined up?
Yes, we have Jack Seifert speaking. Jack heads up the Division of Forestry for the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. Top
And he
guy.
also is quite a timberland owner himself.
Yeah, I don't know, 3,000 acres plus of timber in southern Indiana in multiple locations. So Jack knows timber very, very well. I think people will really enjoy him.
Yeah, so it's an important topic, especially let's say you do have farmers a lot of times don't even think of the woodlot back there as an asset. And you know what? If the margin's a little bit skinny, maybe managing your timberland becomes a part of your side business as it should be. So tune in for that December 3rd at noontime. We're going to do this all over. And in the meantime, if you want to find out more about maximizing your farmland, Howard, where do they go?
Halderman.com. Just that
Halderman.com.
simple.
He's Howard, she's Abby, and my name is Damian Mason. Thanks for being here at the September 25th, 2025 edition of Maximizing Your Farmland webinar series.
Thank you all. Have a great fall.
Thank you.